Hello and welcome to the deep dive. Today we're heading into a case that's really gripped Australia for years, the Peter Falconio disappearance. Picture this, the Australian outback. Huge, hot, incredibly remote, a place where mysteries can just vanish. We're focusing on the Stewart Highway near Barrow Creek way back in July 2001. This is where Peter Falconio, a British backpacker, went missing. His girlfriend, Joanne Lees, survived this absolutely terrifying attack. It's a case, that ended with a conviction, but it still divides people. So many questions left unanswered. So our mission today is to really unpack this. We'll look at the mystery of Peter's disappearance, the key evidence, the trial that convicted Bradley John Murdoch, and crucially, we'll dive into those nagging questions. Was Murdoch really the only one involved? Or is there maybe more to the story? Another party, perhaps. We've spent a lot of time going through articles, court records, all sorts of research to give you the clearest picture we can.
Yeah, it's such a compelling case and really complex. It shows how even when the legal system reaches a verdict, you can still be left with these huge uncertainties, especially when a body's never found, like here. That absence, it just fuels doubt, doesn't it, no matter what a court decides. Makes you question what certainty even means in a case like this.
Okay, so let's go back to that night, July 14th, 2001. Peter Falconio and Joanne Lees, they're driving their orange Combi van up the Stewart Highway. It's around 7:30 p.m. A guy in a white Toyota 4WD, one with a green canopy, flags them down. Says he saw sparks coming from their exhaust. So Peter naturally pulls over, goes to the back of the van with this stranger. Joanne's still in the van, in the driver's seat, and then she hears a loud bang from the back. A moment later, the man's at her window. He's got a silver handgun. Threatens her, ties her hands behind her back with plastic cable ties, tries to tape her mouth, bind her feet. But Joanne, she fought back fiercely. He starts dragging her towards his truck, and she notices he has a dog with him. Then, while he seems distracted, maybe moving Peter's body, she thought she makes a break for it, runs into the bush. She hides for 5 hours. 5 hours in the pitch dark, under bushes, listening to him search for the flashlight, getting really close sometimes.
Just terrifying to imagine.
Absolutely. Eventually, he gives up, drives off. It's past midnight, like 12:35 a.m., when she finally flags down a road train. The drivers get her to safety.
And when the police arrive the next morning, the scene is, well, grim tells part of the story. They find this pool of blood on the roadside, Peter Falconio's blood, covered in dirt, in the Combi van, hidden maybe 80 meters off the road in the scrub. But no Peter, no body. Despite massive searches, months of looking, they find absolutely nothing else, no trace of him or the gunman. And that missing body, that's the immediate massive problem for the police. Plus, you had some initial slight inconsistencies in Joanne's statements.
Yeah.
Small details, maybe about the attacker, the vehicle, the dog.
Understandable, given the trauma, surely.
Oh, absolutely. But it did complicate things early on. Led to some,
Yeah.
Media speculation right away.
Right. So a scene with not much physical evidence beyond the blood, no body, a traumatized witness. How do police even start building a case from that, especially one strong enough for a conviction when the main piece of evidence, Peter himself, is just gone? What was the key?
That's the crux of it, isn't it? It looked like a dead end initially. But the real linchpin turned out to be DNA. Police found an unknown male DNA profile. It was on Joanne Lee's T-shirt, specifically a bloodstain on the back, also on those cable ties used to bind her, and even on the Combi's gear stick.
Okay, so they had DNA, but whose was it?
Exactly. Getting Murdoch's DNA was, well, it was done covertly. They got a sample from his brother. Apparently there was some bad blood there they used. And the results were, frankly, stunning. The DNA on Joanne's T-shirt, they said it was 150 quadrillion times more likely to have come from Murdoch than anyone else.
150 quadrillion. That's astronomical.
It is. It was presented as basically an irrefutable genetic link, tying him right to the scene, right to contact with him.
Wow. Okay, that sounds incredibly damning, almost impossible to argue with. But we know this DNA evidence still gets questioned later, right? We'll get to that. But besides the DNA, Joanne Lees' identification must have been huge, too, even with those initial slight variations in description. She picked Murdoch out from police photos in late 2002 and then identified him in person at the trial in 2005. How important was that?
Immensely important.
Yeah.
Especially alongside the DNA and everything else, because memory under stress, it can be tricky.
Right.
The prosecution really hammered home that her identification in court, face-to-face under oath, showed her certainty.
Right.
And then you had the CCTV footage. This was another powerful piece. Murdoch was caught on camera at a Shell station in Alice Springs. It was 12:38 a.m. on July 15th, just hours after the attack happened north near Barrow Creek.
And his truck.
His vehicle, a white Toyota Land Cruiser with that green canopy, it matched the description Joanne gave. Plus, his own father and a business associate actually identified him in that footage.
The timing fits too, doesn't it?
Perfectly. He had left Alice Springs heading north earlier that evening. Puts him right on track for Burrow Creek around the time of the attack. So the prosecution argued. He commits the crime, drives south all night, maybe disposes of the body somewhere along the way, and then shows up on camera.
Okay, so you've got the DNA, the positive ID, the CCTV placing him nearby just after. It does build a strong case. And the prosecution brought in other things too, right? Circumstantial evidence.
They did. Murdoch had a history involving drugs and guns. An armed drug trafficker.
Yeah.
They found homemade handcuffs in his vehicle, similar to the cable ties used on Joanne, and they had his DNA on them too. And then his behavior after the police started looking for him. Altering his appearance, changing parts on his vehicle. It looked like someone trying to hide.
What about a motive? Did they have a clear reason why?
That was always a bit murky. But the prosecution suggested it could have been fueled by paranoia, maybe from amphetamines. Murdoch later admitted using meth while running drugs.
So it all led to December 13th, 2005. Bradley John Murdoch is convicted. Murder, assault, attempted kidnapping. Life sentence, non-parole period of 28 years. And his appeals failed, even at the highest court.
Exactly. So the legal system reached its conclusion. Murdoch's guilt was affirmed. But, and this is the big but, the debate didn't stop there. Not by a long shot. The core question that keeps coming up is, was he really the only one? Could someone else have been involved? That's the doubt that really persists in the public eye. Was the conviction the whole story?
Yeah, and this is where it gets really messy. That whole no body, no murder argument is just so powerful, isn't it? Peter Falconio's body has never, ever been found, despite one of the biggest police searches Australia's ever seen. That absence just leaves this huge vacuum for speculation. Decades later, just recently, June 2025, police put up a new reward, $500,000 for info leading to his remains. And there's that no body, no parole law in the Northern Territory. It applies to Murdoch. He won't get parole unless he says where Peter is.
And he's never said a word.
Never.
Yeah.
He's apparently very ill now, receiving palliative care for terminal cancer. But still, silence. What does that silence, plus the missing body, do to how people see this case? Does it undermine the justice served?
For a lot of people, yes, it leaves this gaping hole. The court's delivered a verdict, sure. But people often want that sense of total closure, which usually means finding the victim. Murdoch choosing silence, especially now, just makes that feeling of unfinished business even stronger. And then there's the DNA evidence itself, the linchpin. It also has these lingering controversies attached to it. The defense proposed this idea of secondary transfer.
Meaning his DNA got there accidentally?
Right, like maybe he stopped at that same Red Rooster fast food place in Alice Springs that Peter and Joanne had been to. The idea was maybe his DNA, sweat, saliva, whatever got left on a chair and then somehow transferred onto Joanne's t-shirt later.
Is that plausible?
Well, undermined quite a bit when it came out. Murdoch apparently really disliked chicken, hated eating it. So did he even go into Red Rooster? It cast doubt on that specific scenario. But there's a broader point here. Dr. Brian McDonald, a geneticist who looked at the case for a documentary, he agreed the t-shirt sample was Murdoch's, definitely. But he made the point that DNA does not tell us how it got there.
Ah, right. It proves presence, but not how or when the contact happened.
Exactly. And this ties into the debate about low copy number DNA testing, or LCN. That's where they analyze really tiny, maybe degraded DNA traces, pushing the limits of the science. After Murdoch's trial, the UK actually suspended using LCN for a while because of worries about its reliability.
And that made people question the Falconio evidence.
Yes, some legal experts in Australia called for review. Critics argued that maybe other DNA samples from the van's steering wheel, the gear stick, the manacles were low-quality mixtures, and they worried the jury might have thought all the DNA evidence was as rock-solid as that main sample from the t-shirt, when maybe it wasn't.
That's a really crucial distinction, isn't it? That DNA doesn't explain the how. It definitely makes you rethink what seems like solid proof. And then there were the issues around Joanne Lees herself, her testimony, how the public saw her. Those initial differences in describing the attacker's dog or his truck, the defense definitely seized on those. And the fact she'd seen Murdoch's photo in the news before she formally identified him, that led to arguments her ID might have been, tainted.
Yeah, that was a major defense point, suggestibility.
Plus, her demeanor. Some people criticized her for seeming too calm in interviews, given what she'd been through, and she initially didn't mention a brief affair she'd had earlier on the trip. That led one author, Robin Bowles, to suggest Joanne wasn't telling the whole truth.
Right. Bowles did her own investigation, even a reenactment.
and concluded it couldn't have happened exactly like Joanne said, implying maybe more than one attacker.
That was Bohl's theory, yes. That the timeline and actions described seemed difficult for one person alone. So all these things, the inconsistencies, the ID questions, the affair, her demeanor, they created noise around her testimony.
Definitely fueled skepticism, even if the prosecution managed to counter it.
It shows how intensely a key witness gets scrutinized, doesn't it? Especially in a high-profile case. And linking back to the physical evidence, or lack thereof, it's striking. Joanne heard a gunshot, described Peter possibly being dragged, but police found no gunshot residue, no bullet casings.
And no blood trail, just that single pool.
Just the pool of blood, covered in dirt, which some experts found odd if a body had been shot and then moved a significant distance. Also, only Joanne's footprints were clearly identified, not the attackers, not his dogs.
Could rain have washed them away?
That was the explanation given, yes. It apparently rained later that night or the next day, but still, the initial lack of those tracks is something critics point to. It adds to the questions.
Right, the absence of expected evidence can be just as intriguing as the evidence itself. And then there are other witnesses who came forward over the years, people whose stories didn't quite fit the official version, like that truck driver, Vince Millar. He claimed he saw two blokes putting a floppy, jelly-like man into a red car on the highway. That was shortly before he picked up Joanne.
Yeah, he mentioned seeing strange lights, too, near the scene. Headlights doing circles.
And then those sightings of Peter Falconio after he supposedly died in Burke, New South Wales.
Robert Brown and Melissa Kendall at a service station claimed they saw him, recognized him from the papers days later.
And someone who knew Peter apparently suggested he might have faked his own death for insurance money, called him Dodgy Peter.
Now, it's really important to stress, police investigated all these claims, the Millar sighting, the Burke sightings, the fake death theory, and they publicly discounted them, said they lacked credibility.
Okay, but do these stories, even if officially dismissed, still add to that underlying doubt for some people? That maybe Murdoch wasn't alone, or something else entirely happened?
Oh, absolutely. They feed right into that alternative narrative, that persistent what if. And that brings us to the really serious allegations. Police misconduct, maybe even a frame-up. Some critics are blunt. Keith Allen Noble called it a show trial, flatly saying Murdoch is innocent. More controversially, Robin Bowles wrote about a conversation she claims she had with a Northern Territory police officer during the trial.
What did the officer supposedly say?
Bowles claims the officer told her, "We know he wasn't the shooter, but he's going down for it," implying the police themselves had doubts but needed a conviction.
Wow, that's explosive, if true.
Extremely.
Yeah.
And it draws parallels in some minds to other controversial Australian cases where trust in the investigation was questioned. But again, crucial to state, police vehemently deny any misconduct, any planting of evidence. They stand by the investigation, point to Murdoch's conviction and his flight behavior as proof of guilt. So you have these really strong competing narratives surrounding the case.
So putting it all together, you've got the powerful DNA, the eyewitness ID, the CCTV, all leading to Murdoch's conviction, solid legal outcome. But then you weigh that against the missing body, the questions about the DNA's interpretation, the inconsistencies in testimony, those other witness accounts, the frame-up allegations. Does Murdoch's conviction truly explain everything that happened out there on the Stuart Highway? Or do all these loose ends, these alternative readings, point towards something more complex, maybe someone else involved?
It's clear, isn't it? While the courts say Murdoch is guilty, the Peter Falconio case absolutely remains one of those enduring true crime mysteries. Certainty on one side, lingering questions on the other. And that missing body, it just ensures this story never fully fades. It's a constant reminder of the mystery locked away in the outback.
So what does it really mean to be well-informed on a case like this, when the evidence itself can be viewed so differently by different people, and when that one crucial piece of the puzzle Peter Falconio himself is still missing? Lost somewhere out there. What stands out to you listening now as the most compelling or perhaps the most troubling piece of this whole enduring puzzle?